I stopped it. Oh, it's started.
I think it's going.
Yeah, it's running now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining the session today. There was a lot of big competition with the other sessions, so I think they were going to take some share from this one. But I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy to be here to share my organization's story about how we've changed the way we're doing testing and also how we're building software. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. It fits into a broader Agile journey, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about how our shift left transformation ties into that. But I will primarily be focusing on the shift left portion of the whole Agile journey, which is what we focused on. I do encourage you to feel free to connect with me afterwards, or I'm going to stick around after the session also if we don't get to everyone's questions. So if there's anything that comes up and you want to bring up and just exchange professional knowledge sharing, I'm very happy to do that. And please feel free to jot down my email address and to reach out at any point after this event as well. So my name is Klaudia Breslavets. I'm project manager and scrum master for the test transformation team at Vanguard. So we fit in the chief technology office, and our mission in life is to help project teams adopt best practices with test automation and shift left tools, techniques, and to find scalable approaches for the organization. So we have bird's eye view of the architectures throughout IT, and so we help to identify tools that can be centralized and can be used by the most teams at Vanguard. I've been at Vanguard my career. I have a background in IT. I've done a number of different jobs in IT before becoming project manager, and when I'm not helping teams shift left at Vanguard, I really love cooking and anything that's culinary related, and I love to travel. So Vanguard is based out of the US, but we're also a global company. So from US perspective, I've been to 14 US states. Has anyone heard of Vanguard? Okay. We do have a Toronto office. I think it's like 10 blocks somewhere. It's on Adelaide Street. But we're based in Malvern, Pennsylvania, in the U.S. And Vanguard is, very passionate about helping investors. We have a core purpose. It's we take a stand for all investors, treat them fairly, and give them best chance for investment success. So we're a financial services company. And just some information about Vanguard, just like for context about how our IT supports the business. So we were founded in the mid-'70s, so we have a lot of different technology. We have a couple decades worth of systems. We have mainframe. We also are pursuing more modern technologies as well. We're a Java shop. We're also pursuing AngularJS, so we have a lot of different systems. We're a global company, so we have funds in the US and funds in markets outside of the US, and we have a lot of investors, over 20 million, which from a technology perspective, we have to support all of them. And because Vanguard is a virtual company, you can't walk into a brick and mortar Vanguard store and invest with us or get our services. Quality is very important to us because it's a very virtual experience. So we take a lot of importance in that. So just a little bit about our Agile journey. We've been on the journey for about 10 years, and test automation, when we first started, so Craig is also in the audience and we're on the same team, but when we started the test transformation journey, it wasn't just, we want to start doing test automation. It was really part of and complementary to work that we've already done over a span of almost 10 years. So about 10 years ago, we made transition from waterfall practices and waterfall delivery to Agile. So we adopted sprint planning, we adopted scrums, we adopted breaking down work, we adopted having product owner and involving them. But there's still improvement that we can make as well. So one area where we're actively working on it, it's part of our larger transformation, is with more frequent releases. So one thing in Agile that we are hampered with is we have releases like several times a year instead of as software is ready to be released. So we have enhancements, we have strategic projects that we kind of wait until a certain quarterly milestone to actually release them instead of when it's ready. So from that perspective in Agile, we're working toward improving that. About 2 years ago, we also made changes to the way our organization is structured. So if you can imagine from waterfall perspective, we had departments that were structured based on roles, and we decided that we wanted to move toward delivery toward product teams, so we did that. And the final thing that we changed in order to help with teams owning the application that they're working on is instead of quality, instead of the QA team being in a separate department, being matrixed into project team, we put them on the same project team as the delivery manager and the rest of the team. So that was a big change for us. Organizationally, it was kind of like invisible barrier that was there, and it kind of perpetuated this idea that the QA team holds the final say whether something goes out the door or not, and it's like you're working against one another because they're in a different department.
So you say that you guys don't have a project, just products. Every single team works for a specific product?
So it's definitely a journey. We are moving in that direction, but the reason why we're not quite there yet is because we have some monolithic applications as well. So you can imagine that because it is a bunch of products jumbled into one large or several monoliths, it's very hard to carve out your piece of that. So that is a transformation that we're pursuing concurrently with all of this.
Sorry, are you doing this in both your legacy and new environment, or are you just, have you transformed your technology first? Because you mentioned this stuff about mainframe and so on. You guys are not trying to mainframes right now, right?
So we're doing both. We do have legacy, so we're in this state of bimodal technology where we have teams who are working within monolith, they're following legacy practices, they're using different tools, and then we're also pursuing CI/CD. We're calling it business value at startup speed. Our CIO, John Mercanti, has blogged about this on different publications, but so we're pursuing both. We're going to be in a state of flux where we have legacy teams and we're working legacy, but we're also enabling being able to do continuous delivery and have a build pipeline where you're releasing code instantaneously with quality and speed. Two worlds. So right at about that same time point, 2015, we also saw a lot of opportunity with the way we're doing testing and the way we're building software. So as I mentioned earlier, this is what we'll really focus on today. And then we also are pursuing CI/CD, lean. It's huge cultural change, both in the way we're building the software, but also the way that we're actually interacting, how we're funding our projects as well. So before we actually jump into shift left and test transformation, I wanted to ask, can anyone share what shift left means? Anyone know?
I can try.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm trying to do a lead the QA team in my organization. So what we're trying to do is it's prevent versus code and fix and test at the end. So trying to involve from the beginning the PM, BAs, UX, UI designers we have right now, development QA up to our operations and IT actually. So trying to get everybody aware of what contribution means, what prevention means, what everyone should be doing, and how to work in teams to achieve that.
Yep. Yeah, so go ahead.
So the way I would define it is we have very short feedback loops and find issues as soon as you introduce them or in very short duration. Not wait to detect those issues until very much later in the project.
Yep. Yeah, so it's for sure those things. Shifting left is about getting your quality, it's like a mindset shift, so you're changing the way that the team sees quality. It's something that you build in, and you're baking quality in from the start. You're also writing your tests at the lowest level possible, so that way you are creating shorter feedback loops and you get input faster. You don't have to wait until, as a developer, your team finishes coding, gives it to the tester, tests it, and then gets feedback. It's very inefficient. So it's writing your tests at the lowest level possible, getting the feedback quickly, writing smaller tests so they're easier to maintain, cheaper to maintain, and thinking about outcomes instead of task. So with that, you want to increase your feedback, that's your outcome, instead of I just want to add tests, that's a task. So that's shifting left. So why would somebody want to do shift left? Well, in the industry, there's a lot of transformation happening, a lot of digital disruption. So at Wealthfront, and this is all experiences that I found on Quora. So at Wealthfront, for example, some of the feedback out there is we push a feature out on the first day that I was there, test-driven development. It's another important aspect of Wealthfront engineering. There's no QA, and that's because everyone believes quality is everyone's responsibility. At Microsoft, so 2 words, combined engineering, at least in my organization, the roles of developer and tester have fused together in that of an engineer who's now responsible for end-to-end feature ownership, from designing to implementing to testing to deploying to production and finally to constant monitoring. At Amazon, so QA, software testers at Amazon have technical bar. They must meet familiar knowledge of at least one programming language for scripting. To get into automation and be generally more marketable, add object-oriented principles, any language, basic data structure, array, hash map. These are skills required for QA, same as for a software developer. At Etsy, so when I heard about continuous deployment at Etsy.com, it deploys more than 30 software improvements each day. My immediate reaction was this must be hellishly stressful. But surprised to learn that it's exactly the opposite. Continuous deployment was introduced not only to accelerate innovation, but also overcome excessive stress. Facebook, software testing at Facebook is a very dynamic place. Over the last few years, we've gone from basically manual testing by the engineers to making changes, broad array of unit tests, automated browser testing. So you can see there's a lot of trends in the industry that are pointing to quality-based behavior. And I could go on. There's Google and there's these other companies which are also pursuing different ways of building software. And they're leading technology companies. So in essence, continuous delivery is rapidly emerging as a new normal in software development. Companies who fail to make the leap into continuous delivery are falling behind and putting themselves at significant competitive disadvantage. Despite widespread, rapid, and perpetually increasing adoption of this practice, there's a deep-rooted barrier preventing companies from the actualization of true continuous delivery process. And that barrier is testing. So this is the reason why we pursue shift left, is because we see technology as a competitive lever in the marketplace now, and speed and quality and getting value out to customers as soon as you can and what makes sense for you and your industry and organization, it's a competitive advantage now. So testing is no longer really a function of a QA group, it's a function for the whole team. And so we see opportunity in changing this mindset on our project teams and pursuing change. So how did we actually get here? So probably like 3-4 years ago, we're working on our releases, and we find that we have 4 releases a year. We're batching up maybe a year's worth of software. We're batching up enhancements in there, and project teams are racing to our done date. And once we reach it, we take all our QA, we take them offline, and they run regression. So they run 10,000 regression tests. They're manual. You could just imagine this, right? Like imagine being part of a team that has to run manual regression and you're getting feedback so slowly. So we saw this as a huge pain point, and we knew that there's a better way to do it. So we read how Google tests software, and a lot of the experiences that they had were very similar to ours. They had this very manual testing process. It took a long time. The feedback was very long. Wasn't really quite sure if the bug was introduced with recent code or maybe it was just kind of hidden in there. So we knew that we had a lot of opportunity to get better. So what do we do? This is where a test transformation program comes into play. So we started with a pilot of several project teams, and we introduced behavior-driven development using example mapping, using Cucumber, also encouraging the teams to write lower-level tests, unit tests, and then also using Selenium. And we had positive feedback that the team was able to get value from this pilot. So it was good feedback for us to pursue a maybe broader program. So the dials that we're influencing with Test Transformation Shift Left program is reducing testing cycle time. So in regression test cycles, we want to spend less time running our regression. We want to increase our speed to market. So if we're increasing our speed to market and testing is such a large barrier, it's a lagging indicator to show that we're bringing value out faster. And then software testing costs. So taking a department offline to do testing, it's very expensive. So we want to decrease our testing costs. And ultimately, all of these things lead to better software quality. So over a span of a year, we stood up the Testing Center of Excellence department, and we fit in the Chief Technology Office. So what our department does, and it's a little bit different than what industry TCOEs are, is we don't have a group of testers which we matrix out into delivery teams. We actually have 3 teams in our TCOE. So we're on the Test Transformation Shift Left team, and we work on best practices, test automation, figuring out tools for the enterprise. But the other 2 teams we have are performance testing and regression test automation team. So because we did have a lot of manual test cases already, the regression automation team helps to parse through them and reduce them if it makes sense, and also automate them. So when we started the program, we had a lot of perceptions, and I don't know if anyone else experiences this as you're trying to do test automation and roll out the change, but the types of feedback that we had was, I'm not really quite sure what I should be doing with testing. I don't really understand these tools. I don't think this is really part of my job, so I'm a developer or a tester. I don't really think that I don't see this as part of my job. From project team perspective, from leadership perspective, it seems like we're gonna have to take a hit initially when we're trying to learn how to do these new things, and we're not gonna be delivering as much, and this also feels like extra work. So these are the perceptions that we had to overcome, and we're still working on overcoming all of them. So what's our roadmap? So what I'll share is what we did in each of these areas. So for people, for process, for the tools and technology, and also change management and communication, and the lessons learned that we had through this. So with people and culture, we found that when we started our program, we always knew that because we have a lot of manual testers and the organization doesn't have very good test automation skill set or knowledge, we would have to increase this for the manual testers if they were interested in it. But we would have to rely on the development team to pick up these skill sets because they already understood how to code in order to be able to do the test automation. We also knew that we had to change how people were looking at quality. So we were in this cultural loop where we were testing quality out at the end. And we knew that wasn't right. We wanted quality to be owned by the whole team. So we also wanted better collaboration. Different perspectives yield better end results, better end scenarios. So we started teaching teams how to better collaborate together, and also using Cucumber as a collaboration tool to do this. Also, we had to sell the program. So even though we had upper management buy-in, it still took a very big, it took a village to pretty much sell the program and to make it successful. So we had to work with senior leadership and tell them about our business case using those dials that I shared. But we also had to communicate up from the ground and make sure that people who were actually doing the work understood why we're doing it. So we built a brand around Shift Left, actually. So when you say Shift Left, it's probably very big, recognizable word at Vanguard. And it's actually been very helpful because people understand what it means. And we keep telling the story. We repeat the story because it takes people several times to actually remember and understand. To influence our culture, so one thing that we did is offer open space conferences, and we do this very, very frequently. We find that it's a great way to get feedback out from the community and also to share a message. So we host open spaces, and if does the audience know what open space is? So it's a type of conference where instead of coming with an agenda, so we came with there's agenda planned for this event, instead we actually facilitate the agenda during the day. So it's very topical to the people and what's on their mind. So whatever they're thinking about, we help facilitate out those topics that they want to talk about. So what were our lessons learned from people perspective? So everyone pretty much is impacted by test automation and shifting left. From people perspective, it's from developers to testers to leadership teams, to project managers to tech leads. Everyone has to think differently about the way they're doing automated testing and the way that they're building their software. So instead of the BSA working with the business, with the BA working with the business to figure out the requirements, you're now pulling in collab sessions with different perspectives so that everyone is contributing to the scenarios and the requirements that you're building. That way you're building the right thing and everyone's on the same page about the scenarios you're actually writing. And the same thing with upskilling. So initially we thought that perhaps it would be developers and testers who would be most impacted by test automation programs, but we actually found that BAs were also impacted because we're pretty much changing the way we're doing requirements and testing because we are doing ADD and we're using Cucumber and feature files. So there's a lot of impact in that space. And even from leadership perspective, we found that managers have to change the way that they're looking at their project teams. So you have to change the questions that you're asking. You have to think about, are you having collaboration on the team? Are you looking at quality? Are you encouraging the right behavior? So it wasn't just testers and developers and people actually doing the work, but it was also the leadership team that has to change as well. So in the change management space and also community, because we do have a lot of IT teams we're trying to help influence, we did a lot of different things. So from change management activities that are for groups or for individuals, we have a lot of different things. So we offer training, and it's both external and also training that we create ourselves based on expertise that our team develops. We have coaching, so it's a service we offer, and people can go on our SharePoint site and ask for a coaching request where we would actually have an automation engineer sit with that project team and walk them through a shift left strategy. We have office hours. We found that our team was getting a lot of questions throughout the day, emails, chat messages. It could be a very technical question or just very general questions. So we wanted to make a channel, a forum available where people could come and ask one-off questions instead of our team just being kind of pulled in many directions throughout the day. We have open space conferences, which is a big scaled approach to impact a large amount of people. We also invested a lot in building out a Shift Left champion community. So the way our structure is we have several subdivisions in our IT group, and because we're a relatively small team, it's very hard for us to be able to touch every single subdivision and be on the floor with, and in tune with what's actually happening. So we have sponsors, champions, and leads at department head level, at manager level, at senior developer, tester level, who we work with and we communicate with on a regular basis to share what we're doing, what we're thinking, and also to collect feedback. What's actually happening in your area, and is there some kind of gap that you'd like our help filling?
Excuse me. I'm just wondering, you did anything about knowledge transfer and to retain knowledge? Obviously, some people move within other departments. Maybe experience from some people will be very valuable to some other people. And I wonder if you'd like to elaborate a little bit on that. Like, did you do any initiatives on that?
Yeah, so one thing that we did invest very heavily in is building out a community SharePoint page. And it's where we capture pretty much everything that we know about the tools that we're recommending, about events that are happening that are tied to shift left, about best practices, sample projects which have test automation. So like all of this information is captured in a single place. And we also rely on the shift left champion team to help disseminate this information. So we host different forums, brown bags, whether we're rolling out a new practice or tool, or maybe we want to invite a project team who's doing something particularly well and have a story to share. So we make the information and the knowledge sharing available in this way.
And the coaching part, it's someone that, it's not agile coach, I'm assuming it's someone who has the knowledge, expertise to help the team moving from manual test case to like automation, right?
Yes,
Right?
so it would be automation engineer, so like Craig is a coach.
Hello.
So project team would say like, hey, I'm trying to, adopt this tool, or like, hey, I've already adopted this tool, but I'm having trouble configuring it and I can't quite figure it out, or like my tests are taking too long to run, like help me investigate. Sometimes teams will say like, I really want to apply test automation and shift left, but I'm not quite sure where to start.
Okay.
So the coaching requests come in different shapes and sizes, but it's just a forum where the team recognizes they could use some one-on-one support. And so a test automation engineer from shift left team would work with them and work through the problem.
I think a lot of times teams want to do the right thing, and maybe they'll give something a try and then be like, well, like, who knows if I'm doing this right?
Yeah.
Someone please check me. So that's another form that the coaching engagement's going to come on.
So some lessons learned within change management space. When we were really getting the program up and running at such large scale, we wanted to make sure that people were engaged. And the way we would do that is we would have different campaigns. So on our SharePoint site, it's like a internal Facebook/Twitter feed. So we would post things like success stories, and we would give a lot of recognition to project teams who submitted stories about how they're pursuing shift left. We would say success story quarter, have teams submit, how did they do shift left? Like what outcome did they see from what they did? What did they actually do? What did they learn along the way? And we create a platform for project teams to go and tell their story to the community. And it would be at forums like the Open Space Conference, where they could be an internal keynote. It could be at a shift left forum. It could be a very specific departmental meeting, which we carve out. So it really takes different shapes and sizes, but it was really effective because it created this concept of model like poster children. So project teams who are doing a technique particularly well, maybe they adopted a new skill set, they applied it really well on their project team, they're getting a great outcome. They became a story that demonstrates it's possible to do this, and also they became a reference point for other project teams. So like that is another example of how we scale the support, is we propagate up teams who are doing something particularly well, and then they function as reference for other teams. they could reach out to. Another thing that we learned in change management space is that you have to repeat the message very often. So even though for our team, like we live and breathe test automation like day in, day out, and quality, like we think about this all the time. Like we're really laser focused on it. But project teams have other responsibilities. They're focused on delivery and resolving, crisis maybe, or bugs or whatever, new features. So we find that we have to repeat our message many times because even though we understand it, that team may not understand it. They may have missed that forum or that message, or they weren't quite ready to absorb that information at the point they were at when we shared it. So repeating information is very important. Whenever we have small win, project team does something particularly well. They demonstrate shift left principle. We highlight them and we celebrate that, and we recognize them locally to their leadership team. We invite them to tell their story if the community at large had succeeded in something. So like something small and fun that we did when we were really building our community. When we had 500 followers, we did an ice cream social, and we invited teams to have ice cream in the middle of summer. So it's just like small ways to recognize progress within the organization to make it a fun journey instead of like very tedious experience. So within the process space, where we were in this journey is we saw that there was still a lot of silo activity. So, the business was working with the BA, the tester was trying to get information from the BA from the developer. It wasn't very collaborative, so we saw that as a huge opportunity for us, and we focused heavily on that. One thing I will share is we do use Cucumber, but it has turned into, people think that if you use Cucumber, it's like the magic wand, but it's really just a collaboration tool. You don't have to wrap Cucumber around anything and everything, and that was like anti-pattern that happened to us because we focused on Cucumber so much in the beginning, and people misunderstand it as something more than a collaboration tool.
And who was creating the jobs? Let's say, Cucumber, only the testers or developers as well, or both?
Yeah, so I'd say like now that we've been using BDD and using Cucumber, we have lessons learned in that space too, where we see different patterns in project teams. So some things that we see are like, I'm the BA and I just write all the given when then, but I have no idea what the actual steps do.
Okay.
Or like my business doesn't understand or doesn't approve these things until like the first time they're seeing is when they're approving them.
Okay.
They haven't been part of it. So we see a lot of these like anti-patterns that emerge, which we're working on ironing out and helping the organization with as